that India and China didn't use coal, for example, we effectively would be saying to those living in the poor, rural communities, you can never have the same standard of living as us. And that, I think, is the conundrum that faces everybody with this. Paul Embry is with us from home this morning. Paul, frankly, I'm not sure COP26 has achieved anything, has it?
Well, I think you do have to ask yourself whether the whole thing hasn't been a real kind of damp squib. This extravagant event, 25,000 delegates from across the world, and all hoping to sign some agreement, that would save the planet. I think some of the hysteria that we've seen, we're telling our kids that the world is going to end, there's going to be a climate catastrophe. I think we have scientists and media commentators who are constantly presenting us with the worst case scenario. And it is, of course, a serious issue, climate change. We need to understand that, and it needs to be addressed. But equally, we can't have a situation where we're relying on unreliable renewables and the lights go out and working people are expected to pay through the nose for heat pumps and electric cars, and whole industries and thousands of jobs disappear with the impact that will have on local communities. So my assessment, a bit of a damp squib, and let's have a more sensible and temperate debate going forward.
Paul, I absolutely agree with that in terms of the temperate debate. And I have to say that, St. Greta and Prince Charles constantly telling us that we're all going to die. The world is about to end. And I have to say, it's been the most enormous turn-off for the public. I was up in Sunderland with GBNews on Thursday, talking to a lot of people about, what matters to them, and this didn't even feature. Not one person raised COP26 with me. So I think you're right. I think it's been intemperate language. I think it's actually put more people off than it has attracted people. Now, coming up in a moment, we'll cross live to Arlene Foster in Enniskillen in Northern Ireland and Deanna Davison up in Bishop Auckland as they mark local Remembrance Day ceremonies.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, well, it's Remembrance Sunday, but of course, whilst we're all talking about the fact that the Queen is not going to be there at the cenotaph, remember, there are thousands of individual services of varying sizes taking place right across the United Kingdom. And interestingly, I've noticed over the last few years, certainly where I live, there are more poppies on lampposts and displays outside churches than we ever used to see. I kind of think that maybe, whatever we think politically about the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, it has brought home to a younger generation what the impact of war on people's lives can be. Now, I'm going to go and join Arlene Foster now, who is at a Remembrance Day ceremony in Enniskillen. Arlene, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel.
And of course, we're not just remembering, are we, the First and Second World War and all of the conflicts that have taken place since, but the appalling events that happened at that ceremony 35 years ago.
Yeah, it's 34 years ago, 1987, since the Enniskillen bomb. And as with people right across the nation, as you've rightly said, people will join here and are just gathering together now for the ceremony at 11 a.m, where we will remember those who were killed in world wars and in other conflicts. But because of what happened 34 years ago, when the Provisional IRA planted a bomb and killed 12 innocent people here, it does have a special poignancy. And just before I came to you, Nigel, we had a very short little ceremony where the families of the Enniskillen bomb laid wreaths and laid their own tributes before the main ceremony takes place here at 11 o'clock. So it's always a very poignant day, always one that I want to be at, and I'm very pleased again to be here today.
Yes, I mean, it truly was. I remember in 87, it truly was a most awful shock for everybody that a service like that would be disrupted by terrorism. So is this, in terms of what takes place in Northern Ireland on Remembrance Sunday, is this the kind of event that gets a lot of dignitaries to attend?
Indeed, the main Northern Ireland event, of course, is at Belfast City Hall. But here in Enniskillen, for this past 9 years now, we welcome the Irish Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, who comes to join us. So Micheál Martin will be here today. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland was to be here as well today, but unfortunately has COVID. So his number two, Conor Burns, will be here. The Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Louise Hay, is going to be here as well. And we have the Veterans Commissioners. And of course, all those with their own personal memories. You're absolutely right. We're here as a nation, we remember today, but everybody will bring their own personal memories to the War Memorial here at 11 a.m.
Yeah, and in a way, I suppose because of the Troubles and because of the sheer number of people that were killed and wounded during those years, I guess that plays a part in today as well in Northern Ireland, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, absolutely. People come to remember those who have served, those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice, those who were injured. Unfortunately, we had so many people injured during the years of the Troubles. But don't forget as well, there are very many young people who still go off to serve in our army. So we'll remember those who served in Afghanistan. And I think because of what happened in Afghanistan this year, there'll be a particular poignancy for those who have members of their families who have served there. And so we'll be remembering all those who have served their Queen and country. And of course, we're very concerned about the fact that Her Majesty isn't able to go to the Cenotaph in London today. And I just want to send her my very best wishes from Northern Ireland. I know many of the people here in Northern Ireland will be very concerned that she's not able to go to that today.
And of course, Northern Ireland, going back through, 250 years, in terms of the numbers of people from Northern Ireland that have served in the British military, Arlene. I mean, they really are astonishing numbers, and some very high-ranking people in British history, of course, born in the province.
Absolutely. You think of Allenbrook and people like that, of course, who have very strong links here to County Fermanagh. We have, I think, the highest proportion of people who go to serve in our armed services here from Northern Ireland compared to other parts of the United Kingdom. We're very proud of that. And that service continues, and I think will continue for a very long time.
So do I. Arlene, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning from Enniskillen. Now, the Tory sleaze row shows no signs, really, of going away. With every day that goes by, we get fresh revelations about people who've got one extra job or two extra jobs or even four extra jobs. An odd one today with Grant Shapps, who, of course, is the Transport Secretary and a very keen aviator, owns his own aeroplane. He's mad keen on flying. And it turns out that Shapps has been using public money to back a group that are trying to stop the building of houses on small airfields around the country. And here's the odd part, because government policy is to build lots and lots of houses, and yet the Transport Secretary is able to use taxpayers' money to fund a group that want to oppose government policy. I mean, you really couldn't actually make this stuff up. What is also very interesting is the extent to which, in the space of 10 days, little more than 10 days, Boris Johnson has gone from looking pretty much impregnable in terms of his leadership of the Parliamentary Conservative Party into looking very quickly, strangely vulnerable. And if you think back through the events of the last couple of weeks, had Owen Paterson taken his medicine, been suspended from Parliament for 30 days, the story would have been that one Conservative member of Parliament had abused the rules, and that would have been the end of it. But because the decision was made in Downing Street to defend Paterson, suddenly it's opened up a whole can of worms. There are well over 100 Conservative MPs who've got second jobs on top of being members of Parliament. Some of them earn considerable sums of money. As a result of what Boris did over Owen Paterson, it may well be a lot of those jobs will be ruled out. They will not be allowed to do them in the future. So you've now got a significant number of backbenchers who feel their second incomes, in many cases much bigger than their parliamentary incomes, could, before the end of this Parliament, be taken away from them because of the judgment of the Prime Minister. And that puts him in quite a vulnerable position. The other interesting rift that has developed within the parliamentary party, and split parties are never healthy, is you've got a kind of Tory old guard. These are members of Parliament who represent the shires, members of Parliament often with thumping majorities of 20,000, 25,000. I mean, you could almost argue that they're members of Parliament for what are effectively rotten boroughs, because there is no chance of any other party threatening to win the seat from them. So they don't really, if they don't want to, have to work very hard. And those MPs are the ones who tend to have the lucrative second jobs. Those MPs are the ones that tend to spend quite a lot of hours doing second jobs. And they kind of take it that it's their right to be able to do so. Then against that, what you've got are the 2019 intake. And that's an intake of very different people. Far fewer of them who have gone to private schools. Far fewer of them who've come from families with money. Far fewer of them who've grown up on farms or in the shires. And these are young, much, much younger people who've got into Parliament and who know that their majorities are kind of on a knife edge and want nothing to do with the whole concept of second jobs. And so there's a big split emerging within the Conservatives between the 2019 intake and the old guard. Paul Embry, this just isn't going away, is it?
No, it isn't. And it is the sort of thing that the public rightly gets angry about. They send people to Parliament to represent them, to be their voice in the corridors of power, and they expect people to dedicate their full time to that particular role. And an MP's job, I think, if it's done properly, is a very busy job, and it's a job where you have a lot on your plate. You're not just taking an interest in your own constituency issues, but you're also making important decisions and making arguments in the chamber on, national affairs and sometimes international affairs and economic issues, etc. And people want their MPs to be diligent, and they want their MPs to work hard. Now, I don't necessarily think that people are opposed to MPs having second jobs per se, but they certainly don't believe that work should encroach in any way on their primary role. Now, I don't think necessarily there needs to be a ban on second jobs. I think certainly there should be a ban on directorships and consultancies, because I think that has the very real capacity to give rise to conflicts of interests, as we've seen most recently with the Owen Patterson case. But I think other second jobs are probably permissible, but I do think we probably need to have a debate about whether there should be a ceiling on the number of hours that MPs should work in second jobs, a ceiling possibly on the earnings that they get through second jobs, and also perhaps the nature of those second jobs. You know, we're told by a lot of MPs, well, we have to have these jobs as you know, directors on boards because it keeps us in touch with the real world. Well, I would say if you want to stay in touch with the real world and the world of work, then perhaps go and work in a call centre for a week, or perhaps go and do a job in the gig economy, delivering pizzas or whatever for a week. Then you'll really see what it's like to have to subsist on low wages and poor conditions in the workplace. So you know, this is a very serious issue. I think it is something that the public takes an interest in, and MPs have got to get this one right, because at the moment it's got a very nasty stench about it.
Yeah, there's one slightly odd thing, Paul, isn't there? That on the one hand, the public hate career politicians. They want people with real experience of the world. But on the other hand, they don't really want them doing second jobs either. So, I mean, it's a kind of you can't win either way. But I think the point you make is the interesting one. You know, if you're, let's say, a vet or a GP or a professional in some way, perhaps a lawyer, you know, you can carry on doing work whilst you're still an MP. And actually, in many ways, you should do that. Otherwise, you might fall behind over the course of 10 years or however long you serve in Parliament. I think where the problem comes, it's with those who take directorships of companies with whom they've never been associated previously, who are directly affected by legislation that is made in Parliament. And I agree with you there. That does not look right. But it's not easy, is it? It's not easy to put a rule in place that is fair to everybody.
No, it's not, and it's a bit of a minefield to navigate. But as I say, I think yes, absolutely, an outright ban on directorships and consultancies. I think that's a no-brainer in light of recent events, and actually should have been done before now. And you know, I think, as I say, I think most members of the public will say, okay, you know, we're not calling for a ban on second jobs per se, but if we believe that actually it's impacting on your ability to do your primary role as my representative in Parliament, and if we see you earning, you know, millions of pounds, as has been reported in some cases recently, then actually that means probably by definition you're devoting more time to your second role than you are to your first. So I think very seriously we need to consider that ceiling on hours worked in second jobs. And accrued in second jobs. And, you know, if MPs then want to go and be a GP or a nurse or do a little bit of media work, or as I say, you know, I think it would be better working in a call centre or something like that to get a flavour of the real world, then let them do it. But you know, it's an honour and a vocation to be elected to represent thousands of people in the corridors of power. And you do think sometimes with the apparent amount of time some MPs are devoting to their second jobs, whether or not they see it in that way. But they should see it in that way, and we should hold them to account for it.
Well, I think increasingly we are, and it's causing Boris Johnson a major problem. Now, we're off now to Bishop Auckland to speak to Deanna Davison. It's her constituency, of course. Deanna, good morning.
Morning, Nigel. How are you?
Very well. I was saying a few moments ago that what happens at the cenotaph, very important though it is, as a national focus of commemoration, there are services happening, thousands of them, all over the country. So please tell us what's happening in Bishop Auckland this morning.
Well, across the whole constituency, there are tons of services going on, but I'm here today actually in Bishop Auckland. You can see St Anne's Church behind me, and over this way you can see hundreds of people gathering near the cenotaph ready for the actual ceremony to start. There's going to be a procession of those in the armed forces and in kind of other public services who are going to be coming down the main high street to join us, and then we'll be laying our wreaths at the cenotaph, going into the church for a service, a few readings from some of the sort of local stakeholders. But I think the thing that I always find the most moving is how many members of the public turn out for these events, and I think it goes to show how important these remembrance events are, you know, even so far away from when those wars happened, just to really show our thanks to all of those troops and brave servicemen who gave their lives so that we could be here today with the freedoms that we're really privileged to enjoy.
Thank you for joining us this morning. After the break, in a moment, Alistair Stewart joins me to talk about what Remembrance Sunday means to him.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Well, it's Remembrance Sunday, and it's something that means a lot to many, many millions of people. And it's funny, you know, because we're surrounded by monuments and memorials to our past and our history, and we walk past them or cycle past them or drive past them every day without giving them a thought. And I was coming into the studio this morning, and I went round Hyde Park Square. I passed the Australian Memorial, quite a relatively new memorial, but one with the name of every settlement in Australia that lost somebody in the wars. And it made me think that 40% of our contribution in two world wars came from countries that we now know as the Commonwealth. Then I went a little bit round the square, and there was the Boy David, the monument to the Machine Gun Corps. And to think that in World War I, if you volunteered for the Machine Gun Corps, your life expectancy in action was 28 minutes under fire, yet people joined it. And I think this is all around us, and yet we kind of don't notice it very much. Alistair Stewart's joining me. Alistair, you get my point about all these civic memorials, yes. And we kind of, just because it's part of our everyday life, perhaps don't think about them, and maybe this is the one week of the year when we can, and perhaps when we should.
Yes, I mean, it's very much, as I explained to you when we were chatting earlier, steeped in my psyche, in my memory, because my paternal grandfather fought in the First World War with the Highland Light Infantry, a regiment, sadly, that no longer exists because of mergers and cutbacks. My father was in the Royal Air Force. He was just too young, thank God, to get involved in the Second World War, because, as you pointed out, the life expectancy of those gunners, but also in Bomber Command, it was pretty brutal as well.
The figure is astonishing for Bomber Command. I mean, 125,000 men in total served, of whom 56,000 were killed.
Yes.
But a lot of the last 20,000 or so were people that came in right at the end for a few missions. So really, you had a 50% chance of being killed.
Absolutely. And it's often said, you know, that the First World War was won on the playing fields of Eton. My eldest son, as you know, was at Winchester College, and there is a memorial garden within the college because a generation of the best and the brightest was wiped out, and a lot of them in fighter command. You see the films and the pictures of these incredibly young fellows with their cravats and what have you, didn't make their mid-20s.
No.
Just staggering. No. But to me it matters enormously, and also the Royal British Legion. My mother, who was in the Wrens, so she was in the Navy, and again, too young to serve, but she did her bit. She, when Dad retired, then got involved with the Royal British Legion, and she was on the National Committee of the Women's Section. And I think it is worth remembering, as we saw last night at the Festival of Remembrance, those young women and children walking steadily down the steps to the centre field are the widows and orphans of men and women who have died recently in Afghanistan, in Iraq, a little further back, Northern Ireland. It wasn't just Flanders and Dunkirk.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought 20 years ago, because I've always, I mean, you know, like you know, my family always observed this day and thought it mattered a very great deal, and through that and through school, it was drilled into me that this was something that really did matter, and perhaps why it mattered. But I kind of thought 20 years ago, perhaps, given the advancing years, it would sort of slowly fade away. But it almost feels like it's gone the other way. It almost feels like there are more people attending these thousands of local ceremonies around the country. And I think that's got to be, hasn't it, the impact of Iraq and Afghanistan?
I think so. And the other thing is that it's a volunteer army, navy and air force now. And therefore, if your loved one did die in Iraq or Afghanistan, he or she chose to be there, chose to wear the uniform, chose to fight for their country or in the interests of their country. And I think that's quite an important distinction as well. But one step back to something you said there, those village memorials, so simple, but with names again. It's people who lived and worked. You know, it was the baker, the candlestick maker and what have you. And I think for communities like that nowadays, still to remember it, is phenomenal. The thing I wrestle most with, though, is that the First World War is the war to end all wars, and of course that has not been the case. And I'd just like a little bit more edge from people like Nick Carter, who's been out, the Chief of the Defence Staff, doing interviews today, and others, and that is to remind those youngsters that you described so eloquently there, that war sometimes is necessary, but should, wherever possible, be avoided, because it is bloody and it is deadly, whether it's shells and bombs or nuclear, biological and chemical weapons that I had to gear up against when I covered the first Gulf War.
Yes, of course. No, of course. And finally, Alistair, the Queen is the last global leader with a direct link with World War II.
Yes.
She wore uniform in World War II. She knew members of the royal household who went overseas and were killed fighting. Of course, her husband was, mentioned in dispatches in the Royal Navy in World War II.
And her mother, the Queen Mum, lost a brother in the First World War.
Killed at Loos, that's right. Body never found. So this is a very big deal for the Queen. And not only is she the last global leader with a direct link to World War II, but she's been our monarch for almost 70 years. And this was quite a shock this morning, wasn't it?
It was a shock. I mean, it was a shock to us as people who've been looking forward to celebrating the fact that after a tough time, not least the loss of her dear husband, but a tough time medically and a tough time with the family. We don't need to go into that because it's not the day to do that. And I think we were all talking, weren't we, that this was a moment of celebration for her. Sombre, quiet. She'd stand there at the Foreign Office window on the balcony, looking sombre with her 5 poppies for all of the armed services. And I think it would have been a fillip for her, a lift. And I think it is genuinely very, very sad. And I hope and pray that it is literally just she strained her back or something like that, because the courtiers have got to be straight with us about what's happening. They weren't last time with the hospital and the tests, and that was outrageous. I hope it is straight. I hope she recovers, but she is a woman of an age.
She's 95. Absolutely. Alistair, thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts on this very important day.
Thank you, Nigel.
Paul Embry joins us. Paul, how do you reflect upon Remembrance Sunday?
Well, I mean, I always observe the 2 minute silence. The village where I live has a fantastic turnout at the War Memorial, and I think you're right. There is almost a resurgence of Remembrance Day. And I attribute that largely, as you said, to what's happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what I also think, Nigel, is it's a reminder, really, of what the older generation has got to offer us, because I think we live in a world today where we're almost obsessed with youth, and we have a bit of a cult of youth, and we kind of attribute to young people this great wisdom and foresight. And of course, you have to take on board what young people are telling you and what their concerns are. But I think we often do that, and we dismiss the views and the experiences. We often talk today about lived experience, don't we? That's the phrase. And we dismiss the lived experience of the older generation and often treat them with contempt. And we should be a little bit more humble about it, because these people have been through experiences and seen things, witnessed things that nobody should ever have to go through. Those people who have been to war and seen comrades killed, etc. So I think, it reminds me that we should be a little bit more humble and reflective in the company of the elderly generation, and to listen a little bit more to their views and opinions and their experiences, because they have an enormous amount to offer us still.
Yes, and of course the World War II generation, now reaching an age where their numbers are dwindling pretty fast. And, those that served in World War II, if you meet them now, they're likely to be 97 or 98 or something like that. So it's something that is beginning to slip beyond direct human recollection. And maybe, Paul, that's why Captain Tom Moore last year, Burma veteran, who was doing the walks around his garden in the run-up to his 100th birthday, maybe that's why he became such a sensation, that it linked us to a time, one of the last living links for young people with something they're not going to be able to experience for much longer.
Yeah, and I think those memories are slipping away a little bit. I mean, when I was at school, secondary school, two of my teachers fought in the Second World War, and I was honoured to have conversations with them about that. But so many of those people have now died away. And I was thinking the other day, actually, if you were a young serviceman who started at the beginning of the war in 1939. And you were called up in 1939, you'd be over 100 today. I don't think there's probably anyone who's less than 100 who was there at the outbreak of war, serving in the military. And really it tells us something about how long ago it now was. But we must never forget it. And, I think Alistair talked about the war memorials and how moving they are, and how it's important that we maintain monuments like that. I'd also give a plug, I think, Nigel, to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. I, on a couple of occasions, have visited the grave of a relative, great-great-uncle, who died in the First World War, and he's buried at Bethune Cemetery in northern France. And these cemeteries are amazing. They're incredibly well-maintained and immaculate, and the people who carry out that maintenance do a really fantastic job in making sure that those resting places are as peaceful and as tranquil and as immaculate as they can possibly be. So the Commonwealth War Graves Commission do a fantastic job, and we should support them wherever we can. But absolutely, we need to honour it every year, because those people make huge sacrifices for us.
Yeah, they do an amazing job, Paul. There's no question about it. And of course, what everyone forgets is we're still finding bodies from the First World War every year. 20 or 30 bodies every year are discovered, and that's either through the plough, or it's through industrial developments or housing developments or whatever it may be. And the astonishing thing now is that a significant number of those that get found are, through modern day research and DNA, able actually to be named. So there are people, if you can't identify a body, it will go into a grave under a Commonwealth War Graves headstone saying known unto God. But now we're beginning to name people. And just in the last couple of weeks, an officer who was killed at the Battle of Arras has been named, and he's going to be interred with a headstone, who happened to be a Wordsworth, a relation of the poet. So that work, Paul, that you highlight and the amazing condition that those cemeteries are kept in. The remarkable thing is that work's still going on today, and my guess is they'll be finding bodies from the First World War for centuries to come.
Well, I recently read a book about Passchendaele, which was, arguably the most brutal and bloodiest battle of the First World War. And it was incredibly graphic, what went on. And I know you're a bit of a military historian, Nigel, so you know all of this, but the conditions at Passchendaele, with soldiers and horses in some cases literally drowning in the mud. And you see nowadays the old grainy black and white photos of Passchendaele where, they've got the duck boards, which was really the only way that you could move around in that environment. But it just reminds you, actually, for all the problems we think we have as the younger generation, and for all the difficulties and challenges that we face in our life, and we're constantly told we've got to check our mental health, and I understand all of that. But actually, when you read in graphic detail the experiences of that generation and the literal horrors that they had to experience, and often, if they were fortunate enough to survive, would come back, often not talk about it. It was the old kind of stiff upper lip thing, get on with life, look forward, keep calm, carry on. It shows incredible fortitude mentally, emotionally for that generation to have done what they did and contributed to our country in that way. So we owe them an enormous amount.
Enormously powerful stuff. Enormously
very powerful stuff.
That was the 2-minute silence in Birmingham, and something that was observed at thousands of ceremonies right across the country. You may have noticed that Birmingham went to the 11 o'clock silence slightly later than perhaps anticipated, but that's not the point. This all started, of course, because it was the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918 when the armistice came into effect. Well, following on directly from that, Labour Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey has been busy out meeting armed forces veterans to learn how better to support ex-service personnel with mental health problems. It's estimated that 7% of veterans suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder, much higher than the rates in the general public. Labour is promising £35 million to boost mental health care within local authorities and through charities, money that until recently was used for Ministry of Defence interpreter contracts in Afghanistan. From Mansfield, our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has more.
Despite leaving the battlefield long ago, many British soldiers continue to endure the horrifying effects of war. Some of their wounds can't be seen. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, affects 7% of UK veterans. It's a much higher figure if you served a combat role in Afghanistan or Iraq. In Mansfield, support sessions like this help ex-soldiers manage the daily struggles. As a young man, David joined the Northumberland Fusiliers, and in 1974, he fought in Northern Ireland. Now he's aged 71, and PTSD is not only a part of his life, but also his wife's. Rosalind says that conflict trauma puts an intense strain on relationships.
It's not very easy because you don't know what you're letting yourself in for. Basically, you've got to pray and hope that you can work together. But it doesn't work always you work together because one or the other can't put up anymore. So it's usually the wife who suffers or the girlfriend or the partner because there's so much power for that person, so much temper fired at them, you just don't know where to turn.
David wants more support for veterans like him.
I think a lot of it is with civilian doctors. You go to your civilian doctor, he doesn't know how to deal with it because they're not, they're not that medically trained. It's not like in your regiment, you can go to your doctor in the regiment, your doctor knows how to deal with you. Because, as I said, he's military himself. He's in Bosnia, he's in Ireland or wherever you are. He knows what the situation is around you. But you go to a civilian doctor, he doesn't know what you've gone through or anything else.
Joining the group today, Labour's Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey. Labour's promising £35 million in mental health funding.
We heard in the discussion this afternoon how many forces personnel and veterans suffer from mental health problems. And I'm really shocked the government still is only this year putting in 20 million to support those veterans with mental health problems. We could do a lot more, we could do a lot more now, and we've got a plan to boost that by £35 million. So we take the money that would have been training interpreters in Afghanistan, which we don't now need for obvious reasons, that should be switched straight into the sort of help for the groups that would be alongside and help some of the service people who have real serious PTSD problems get their lives back together again and rebuild beyond the forces.
Mansfield's Labour Mayor says his council already puts extra emphasis on supporting local veterans, but more funding will always help.
We think it's really important that people who have served their country and been in traumatic situations should be able to get housing when they come out. And so they go straight to the top of our housing list by putting things in place at the highest place in government, and us being able to help locally will enable these people to make that transition and get by in everyday life.
There should be more respite centres opened so that veterans can probably spend a couple of months, even if it's only 2 months to 6 months, in a centre with people like themselves and experienced people experienced in mental health, to put them back on the right track, if possible.
The Ministry of Defence does provide a variety of support for veterans, but says that in a crisis, it can direct towards somebody that can help in that instance. On Remembrance Sunday, we think of the men and women who gave their lives for our freedom, but it's important not to forget those who still suffer because of their own sacrifice. Will Hollis, reporting from Mansfield in the East Midlands.
And yes, that's a very important issue because so many people who've been in active service do struggle to reintegrate back into civilian society, and I'm pleased to see the Labour Party actually picking up this cause. I think that's a very good thing indeed. I'm certainly struck whenever I go to America, the level at which they support veterans. They revere people who've given service to their country, and we've been very, very bad at this over the years, and I just hope we are now getting better. Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Hi, I'm Simon McCoy.
And I'm Kirsty Gallagher. Join us from Monday to Thursday, 6 till 9 a.m. for the Great British Breakfast.
We'll be discussing the stories that matter to the UK.
With a wealth of experienced guests.
Expert analysis.
We follow our own agenda.
And you too could have the chance to have your say on the stories of the day with our very own Great British Breakfast Club.
So make sure you join us for the Great British Breakfast, Monday to Thursday, 6 till 9 a.m. here on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's top stories. There's also a smattering of history and archaeology and features that define our great British Isles. You'll hear my thoughts unfiltered, as well as those of my guests, and we don't always agree. And we want to hear from you too. Neil Oliver Live, Saturdays from 7 on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
The Cambridge Union cancels a number of speakers, then John Cleese cancels the Cambridge Union, then the Cambridge Union uncancels the cancelled speakers. This is Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Some of the greatest minds in British history were nurtured at Cambridge University. Think of Isaac Newton, Alan Turing, Bill Oddie. The list is endless. This is an institution committed to the pursuit of truth and knowledge, free inquiry and free speech. This is no better encapsulated than in the Cambridge Union, where visiting speakers thrash out contentious issues and are challenged by some of the brightest young people in the world, or at least that's the idea. So this week it was reported that the president of the union had drawn up a blacklist of speakers who would never be invited on again because of the risk that they might cause offence. This was in the wake of a recent appearance by art historian Andrew Graham Dixon, who had impersonated Hitler during a debate about good taste. And apparently this had offended a number of students. I'm not sure why. I mean, perhaps they were annoyed that he hadn't even bothered with a costume. You know, at least when Prince Harry did it, he made an effort. But why would Andrew Graham Dixon's speech be considered offensive? I mean, did any of these students really think that this renowned art historian was impersonating Hitler in order to promote the values of the Third Reich? And if they really are that stupid, they really shouldn't be at Cambridge University at all. They should be sitting at home, entertaining themselves with an abacus or something like that. And of course, while most students see this kind of pearl clutching from their peers and they just roll their eyes, not least because it encourages the media to unfairly dismiss an entire generation as snowflakes, it is becoming more and more common among a vocal minority, particularly those who go into student politics. I mean, the National Union of Students has an especially poor record on supporting free and open debate. I mean, the NHS has effectively turned into an authoritarian pressure group that gets you a 10% discount at Matalan. And it goes without saying that nobody is entitled to a platform, and therefore nobody's free speech is threatened by a private body like the Cambridge Union deciding not to invite them. But they ought to be criticised for this, not least because the union's stated purpose, one that it proudly declares on its website, is to expose its members to the widest spectrum of opinion. Now, the plot thickened a few days ago when John Cleese, who had been booked to appear at the union on Friday, decided to pull out because he'd read about this blacklist. And he pointed out that he had also impersonated Hitler and therefore